This is Theology Bits, a ministry of Central Lutheran Church, Eugene, Oregon. I'm Pastor Ben. This week, in our season of creation, we have our second in our installment, Finding Life. And these are built on the Gospel of John, and today we're focusing on John chapter 6, when Jesus says, I am the bread of life. And in this season of creation, if you recall, everything is structured around the incarnation. How does God, the Word becoming flesh, God becoming human, how does that relate to creation? That's going to be the question we're going to be considering for these next, this and 4 more videos of how is it that this functions? Well, last time we talked about the prologue of the Gospel of John, just the overview. How does this relate at all? And talked about the question of life. But today we focus on our first of our I am statements in the Gospel of John. When Jesus says, I am the bread of life. He says several things in the Gospel of John, all these I am statements. I am the vine, you are the branches. I am the resurrection and the life. Here, it's I am the bread of life. And these I am statements is a formula that many scholars have pointed to, comes from the Old Testament. When Moses meets God at the burning bush, God says, I am that I am. And the formal name of God in the Old Testament that is unpronounceable because we don't have the vowels, is derived somehow from the to be verb. I am that I am. So when Jesus uses this I am statement, many scholars for a long time have said he's clearly identifying himself with this God. Now that's probably true, but I'd like to suggest something more is going on. Because if all he was doing was that, he would have just said, I am that I am. Jesus never says, I am that I am. It's always, I am something. And in this case, it's not just life, but the bread of life. I am the bread of life. And each one of the I am statements identifies Jesus in some way. And these I am statements, all of them respond to a need, a basic need that humans have, that they haven't called out to Jesus that they need it, but it is an obvious need. Here, the need for people who are hungry, the basic need for sustenance. But it is part of that incarnation. Jesus is saying, in my opinion, that yes, indeed, he is this Old Testament God, but also that he's the incarnation. And the incarnation responds to human needs as a human in this world. Jesus, the Word has become flesh. And they also have a direct teaching component. Jesus says, you on this earth are people who need food. Frequently you need food, but this is food that perishes. Obviously, you eat, later on you need to eat again. He is going to provide the food for eternal life that will not cease to satisfy. There is no portion where this won't last. It is the imperishable, and eternal life is not just a future thing, but in the Gospel of John, it begins now. It will continue into the future, but it is an experience we have right now, eternal in both senses, then and now. And then he defines what this bread of life is. He says, this is my flesh. Remember, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Some people, by the way, have taken John 6 when Jesus talks about his body and blood, his flesh and blood here, as if it was talking about the Lord's Supper. And I see why people think that. But many others have said, I think it's more basic. It's just the incarnation. This is God made flesh. And interestingly, what does Jesus say? That if you consume this, you shall be part of me. Remember, we talked about the life that really is life in our last video, and the Gospel of John changes you to become children of God. Something new has happened to you. But it's going to be not just in a vague thing, but this flesh, this incarnation, is going to be concrete. Something you can see, something you can touch, something you can taste. More than anything, something you can experience. That the relationship we have with God in creation is creational. We are created, and therefore we experience it in creation. And in fact, Jesus uses very crass language here. He doesn't just say, if you eat my flesh and drink my blood. He says, if you gnaw upon my flesh, if you drink down my blood, then you will have a part of me. You will be part with me. And so then this question we have of when Jesus says that, how come after he says this sounds pretty good. He's going to provide the bread for eternal life. He has just fed the 5,000 and said, well, if you think that's good, I'm going to provide you even more beyond the sustenance of this world. But the response of the people is the opposite of what you think. Many people leave. They didn't like this. And in fact, Jesus starts that. Said, you're not following me because you believe in me. You're following me because you had enough bread. You liked having bread. You liked me providing you food. But instead, we're going to flip it. What does it really mean to have food? It means you've got to be a part of me. And so the question is, do we in fact consume this bread of life? Or is it that we ourselves become the bread of life for others? Well, Jesus uses a term. You shall abide in me, which the answer to those questions then is yes. Yes, you are consuming the incarnation into yourself, but you yourselves are already the incarnation. You yourselves, your humanity, it's not just that Jesus became one human. Jesus became all humans. Jesus became you. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The life that really is life. You are part of Jesus. The incarnation is present in you. The creation that is in you is the creation that is in the incarnation, that is in God. So if that's true, how come everybody leaves? Because it is life that really lasts, but it's a new type of life. Something that's going to change everything about who you are. In the Gospel of John, it is the opposite of that which perishes. That which perishes is that which is changeable, that which is fallible, that which will not last. And here we have, this is the life that will be forever. The part of me that you are will be forever. You will never be what you were before. That basic need you have leads you to something, to an even greater need that you didn't know you had. That there was a plight going on within you that was greater than simply the hunger you had for bread. The hunger for bread was a real thing, but it leads us to something else. All of Jesus' miracles are called signs in the Gospel of John. And a sign leads to a referent. It leads to something bigger going on. And here in the I am statement, that's what Jesus is saying. This incarnation, this God becoming flesh, turns out to be what is for you a new way of living. This has been Theology Bits. I'm Pastor Ben.